before we step into the misty mountains of Sparta, before the clang of bronze and the echo of marching feet. Let me invite you to a journey through time. Here, history isn't rushed. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Tales of warriors, kings, civilizations long gone, and secrets buried in shadow, all told slowly, so you can drift through them, almost like a story before sleep. If you ever wonder what it felt like to train as a Spartan, or to witness the rise and fall of empires, or to hear legends that don't appear in textbooks, then this is a place for you. Subscribe and become part of this quiet journey through the past. Like the video if you want more stories like this. Because every like is a small spark that keeps these legends alive. Now, settle in, and let's walk into a world where discipline, bravery, and endurance were everything, a world where even a single day could change a boy forever. This is Chapter 1, The Legend of Sparta. The sun slowly rises over jagged mountains, casting a golden glow over a land that feels both ancient and untamed. Mist curls around the peaks like silent whispers of the past. The smell of dew mixes with dust and the faint tang of iron from armor left to dry in the morning sun. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of footsteps hitting stone and leather resonates across the valley. It's calm, almost peaceful, until you realize those footsteps aren't just anyone's. They belong to Spartan warriors. And somehow, you are supposed to be one of them. Welcome to Sparta, a city-state that didn't just train warriors. Sparta lived warriors. Every corner of the society, from the marketplace to the family hearth, revolved around one simple idea: strength, discipline, and survival. Unlike other Greek city-states where art, philosophy, and democracy thrived, Sparta's priority was simple. They were obsessed with one thing: creating perfect warriors. And by perfect, I mean men and boys who could endure pain, hunger, exhaustion, and humiliation and still come out swinging a spear. Now take a deep breath. Picture yourself walking along dusty streets lined with stone barracks and bronze shields gleaming in the sun. You hear the occasional shout of a trainer barking orders at a group of boys. There's no school, no cartoons, no after-school snack time. Just running, wrestling, and the ever-present sense that you are being watched. And that's when you realize the big question. Could you survive even one day as a Spartan boy? Let's be honest here. Most of us struggle just getting out of bed for school in the morning. We complain about early alarms, sore muscles after gym class, or a cold shower. Now imagine waking up at the crack of dawn every day, being thrown into icy water, forced to wrestle your friends until you can barely lift your arms, all while someone older and meaner than your worst gym teacher is watching your every move. And failure isn't just disappointing, it's dangerous. That's Sparta. One misstep, and you might not even make it to breakfast. But don't worry, we're not going to throw you straight into the freezing waters just yet. First, we need to understand why Sparta was like this. Why did a whole society decide that every boy and man had to be a walking, talking, killing machine? Why wasn't there room for art, music, or, just chilling on a sunny afternoon like most people? It all starts with survival. Sparta was located in Laconia, a region of Greece that was rugged, mountainous, and not exactly paradise for farming. Life here was tough. Crops could fail, winters could be harsh, and neighbors weren't always friendly. Sparta couldn't rely on sheer numbers to protect itself. So instead, the Spartans relied on something more reliable: discipline, training, and pure muscle. They believed that if every male citizen was a formidable warrior, the city would survive no matter what. And they took this philosophy to its absolute extreme. From the moment a Spartan child was born, their fate was decided. This wasn't a, let's see what hobbies you like, kind of childhood. No, your survival, your identity, your very life depended on your ability to endure hardship, obey orders, and become a weapon in human form. And so, The story of a Spartan boy begins even before he takes his first breath, in a world where weakness was not tolerated and only the strongest or the cleverest would thrive. But what did a day in the life of a Spartan boy actually look like? Well, imagine living in the barracks from the age of 7, being taught to fight, run, and endure almost anything. Imagine being so hungry that stealing a bite of bread becomes a test of cunning, or sleeping so little that the morning training feels like torture by fire. Imagine facing physical punishment not as an exception, but as a rule. And on top of that, imagine being constantly watched, judged, and measured against your peers. One misstep, and you might end up on the receiving end of some very unpleasant lessons. And yet, despite all this, Spartan boys weren't miserable all the time. In fact, their lives were strangely rich in camaraderie, subtle humor, and moments of quiet rebellion. Wrestling matches weren't just about fighting. They were about learning who your friends were, who you could trust, and who would laugh with you when things got tough. Stealing food wasn't just survival. It was a thrill, a little game of wit and risk. Even in a society that seemed so harsh on the outside, there was a strange rhythm, a balance between terror and play, discipline and cleverness. So, as we step into this world, take a moment to appreciate just how extreme it was. Picture yourself standing in a dusty Spartan courtyard. The sun warms your back, the scent of leather and iron is in the air, and the sound of marching feet grows louder. Somewhere in the shadows, older boys are sparring, while a trainer sharpens a spear and watches your every move. Your stomach grumbles, your muscles ache, and you realize this is only the beginning. Over the next chapters, we'll follow a Spartan boy from infancy to the dreaded Agoge, the infamous training system that would break some, toughen others, and leave the strongest standing. You'll see the daily routines, the punishments, the tests of cunning and endurance. You'll meet the trainers who were strict to the point of terrifying, and the boys who found ways to survive anyway. And throughout all of it, we'll ask the question that haunts every modern human trying to imagine this life. Could you survive even a single day? Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't. But that's exactly why the Spartans became legends. Before we dive into the actual training, it's worth noting that Sparta wasn't just about making tough warriors. It was about creating a mindset, a culture, a way of life. A Spartan boy wasn't just learning how to fight. He was learning how to think, move, and exist as part of a machine that valued survival, loyalty, and strength above all else. And while it may sound terrifying to us today, it worked. For centuries, Spartan warriors were feared across Greece and beyond. So sit back, relax, maybe grab a blanket and a warm cup of something cozy, because we're about to enter a world that is almost impossible for us to imagine. A world where childhood is a battlefield, discipline is survival, and every day is a test. And don't worry, we'll take it slow, with plenty of pauses, little jokes, and moments to breathe, because unlike a Spartan, you don't have to wrestle anyone, at least not yet. By the end of this journey, you'll see why Sparta's reputation as a warrior society wasn't just a myth, why the Agoge shaped boys into men who could endure anything, and why, for most of us, surviving a single day would be, well, let's just say it wouldn't go well. So let's take a deep breath. Imagine the misty mountains, the glint of bronze armor, the faint sound of leather boots striking stone, and step quietly into a world that is harsh, fascinating, and strangely captivating. This is Sparta, and this is only the beginning. Chapter 2, Birth and the Role of the Spartan State. In Sparta, life did not begin gently. There were no soft blankets, no quiet rooms, and no long moments of rest for new parents. A Spartan baby entered the world already under inspection. From the very first breath, the state was watching, not in a creepy modern way, but in a very serious, ancient, this kid might defend our city one day kind of way. When a Spartan boy was born, he did not immediately belong to his parents. That might sound strange, but in Sparta, the state came first. Always. Family was important, yes, but only after loyalty to Sparta. So instead of celebrating quietly at home, the newborn was taken to be examined by elders of the community. Old men who had seen wars, hunger, and loss. Men who believed survival was not a right, but something you earned. These elders checked the baby carefully. They looked at his body, his limbs, his strength, his overall health. They were not doctors as we know them today, but they believed they could spot weakness early. If the child appeared strong and healthy, he was allowed to live and be raised. If not, history tells us he may have been abandoned, left exposed to the elements. It sounds harsh, and it was, but to the Spartans, this was not cruelty. It was preparation. In their minds, a weak warrior would endanger everyone. Now pause for a second and think about that. Most of us had our biggest challenge, as babies being allowed diaper change or a cold bath. Spartan babies were already facing life or death judgment before they could even cry properly. Not exactly a relaxing start, but if a child passed his first test, things did not suddenly become soft and warm. Spartan parents were expected to raise tough children. Mothers were encouraged to be strong themselves. In fact, Spartan women were famous across Greece for being athletic, confident, and outspoken. Other Greek city-states found this shocking. Spartan women exercised, wrestled, and trained their bodies. Why? Because strong mothers were believed to produce strong sons. Spartan mothers were not gentle in the way we usually imagine motherhood. They did not rush to comfort every cry. They believed too much softness created weakness. Babies were exposed to cold, hunger, and discomfort early on, not because parents were unkind, but because they believed hardship built strength. In Sparta, comfort was suspicious. Even bedtime was different. Spartan babies were not raised in silence and peace. Noise, chaos, and rough handling were normal. The idea was simple. If a child learned early that the world was not kind, he would not be shocked by it later. Think of it as ancient tough love taken to an extreme, and hovering over all of this was a state. Sparta was not just a city. It was a system, a machine designed for war. Every citizen was a part of that machine. You were not being raised to follow your dreams. You were being raised to hold a shield, stand your ground, and never run away. As a child grew, the state slowly increased its presence. Parents were expected to follow Spartan rules closely. Raising a soft child was seen as a failure, not just of the parents, but of their duty to Sparta. Discipline was praised. Endurance was admired. Complaining was, well, not a good idea. And yet, this wasn't a joyless society. Not completely. Spartan children still played. They ran, chased each other, laughed, and got into trouble. But their games were different. Wrestling was not just play, it was training. Racing was not just fun, it was preparation. Even arguments were lessons in toughness and self-control. As the boy grew older, he became more aware that his life was not fully his own. Older boys were watched closely. Elders observed how they behaved, how they reacted to pain, how quickly they learned discipline. Every small action was a kind of test. Cry too much? That's noticed. Give up too easily? Also noticed. And here's where things get even more intense. At around the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their homes. No long goodbye, no slow transition. One day you slept near your family. The next day, you were living in communal barracks with other boys your age. This system was called the Agoge, and it would define the rest of your childhood. But before we reach that moment, it's important to understand why the Spartans did this. Sparta ruled over a large population of helots, enslaved people who worked the land. The helots outnumbered Spartan citizens by a huge margin. This created constant fear. Fear of rebellion, fear of uprising, fear of losing control. So the Spartans believed their only safety came from strength, absolute strength. Every Spartan boy was raised to be a soldier because every Spartan man was expected to be one. There was no backup plan. No, I'll do something else. War was not an event. It was a way of life. This fear shaped everything. It shaped how babies were raised, how children were disciplined, how emotions were controlled. Spartans believed fear should be mastered early or would destroy you later. Pain was normal. Hunger was normal. Obedience was survival. Now, if you're listening to this while cozy in bed, this might all sound a little much. And that's fair. Most of us panicked when Wi-Fi stopped working for 5 minutes. A Spartan child was expected to face discomfort daily and stay quiet about it. But here's the strange thing. Many Spartan boys grew proud of this life. They believed they were stronger than others, better prepared, chosen, and, in a way, they were. Other Greeks feared Spartan warriors. They whispered stories about their discipline, their silence in battle, their refusal to retreat. This pride started early. From birth, a Spartan boy was told, without words, that he mattered only if he was strong, that his survival meant something bigger than himself, that his pain served a purpose. As bedtime stories go, this one is not soft, but it is important, because to understand why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training, you have to understand that it didn't start with training at all. It started with birth, with inspection, with expectation, with a society that saw children not as fragile, but as future warriors waiting to be shaped. And as the sun sets over Sparta and the mountains grow quiet, a young boy falls asleep knowing that tomorrow will be harder than today. He doesn't know it yet, but soon he will leave his family behind. Soon his real test will begin. And when it does, there will be no turning back. Because in Sparta, once you were born strong enough to live, you were expected to prove it every single day. Chapter 3. Childhood in Sparta, preparing for the Agoge. By the time a Spartan boy reached early childhood, the hard part had already begun. And no, that's not a joke. In most places, childhood is about learning, playing, and slowly figuring out the world. In Sparta, childhood was more like a warm-up round, a preview of the suffering to come. Think of it as life saying, "You're not ready yet, but you will be." From a young age, Spartan boys were encouraged to move. A lot. Sitting around doing nothing was not admired. Running, climbing, wrestling, and testing strength were part of daily life. Even games were designed to make boys tougher. If you tripped and fell, you were expected to get up quietly. Crying too much earned you looks. Not angry looks, disappointed looks. And somehow, those were worse. Spartan parents, especially mothers, played a big role during this stage. Mothers were known for being strict, proud, and emotionally strong. They didn't hover. They didn't panic over scraped knees. A Spartan mother was expected to raise a child who could handle pain and fear without falling apart. Comfort was limited. Encouragement was firm. Love existed, but it came wrapped in expectations. Boys learned early that strength was admired. Weakness was not punished directly, but it was noticed. And in Sparta, being noticed for the wrong reasons was dangerous. So children learned to control themselves, to stay quiet, to endure small discomforts without complaint. Cold mornings, empty stomachs, long walks, these were normal. As boys grew, their play became more intense. Wrestling matches broke out often. Running races happened everywhere. Boys competed naturally, always trying to prove who was faster, tougher, or braver. There were no trophies, no medals. Winning meant respect. Losing meant you trained harder next time. Older boys watched younger ones closely. This was not kindness. It was training. Younger boys learned by copying what they saw. How to stand, how to walk, how to speak with confidence but not arrogance. Talking too much was discouraged. Spartans valued short, sharp speech. If you could say something in 3 words instead of 10, you were winning. Discipline was slowly introduced. Boys were taught to follow instructions immediately. No questions, no excuses. Hesitation was corrected quickly. This was done to prepare them for the Agoge, where obedience could mean survival. Food was simple, very simple. Spartan meals were not exciting. No sweets, no treats, no just one more snack. Hunger was common, not starvation, but enough to keep you uncomfortable, enough to remind you that food was not guaranteed. This taught boys to appreciate what they had, and more importantly, to live without comfort. Even clothing was basic. Spartan boys wore minimal garments. Shoes were rare. Walking barefoot toughened the feet. Sleeping arrangements were not cozy. Hard surfaces, rough bedding, nothing soft enough to make you forget where you were. And yet, despite all this, Spartan childhood was not completely grim. Boys laughed, they joked, they teased each other. Humor existed, but it was sharp and dry. Making fun of weakness was common. Sarcasm was appreciated. Crying about it was not. There was also storytelling. Elders told stories of brave warriors, heroic deaths, and famous battles. These were not bedtime stories meant to calm children. They were lessons, stories that taught courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. Boys grew up hearing about warriors who chose death over retreat, about men who stood their ground even when defeat was certain. These stories were not meant to scare them. They were meant to shape them. As boys approached the age of 7, something began to change. The freedom of early childhood slowly faded. Parents became more distant, not emotionally, but physically. The idea of family started to loosen. Boys were reminded that soon they would belong to Sparta more than to their home. This transition was intentional. The Agoge was coming, and the Agoge did not care about your favorite blanket or your bedtime routine. So Spartan society prepared boys by slowly hardening them, both physically and mentally. Boys were taught to endure embarrassment. They were corrected in public. Shame for mistakes. Praise for silence. Praise for endurance. Praise in Sparta was rare, which made it powerful. A single nod from an elder could mean more than 1,000 compliments elsewhere. Fear was also introduced. Carefully, not panic, but awareness. Boys learned that mistakes had consequences. Not always punishment, but sometimes pain. This wasn't cruelty for fun. It was conditioning, teaching boys that fear could be faced, not avoided. By now, a Spartan boy understood something very important. Life was not about comfort. It was about readiness. Every scraped knee, every cold night, every empty stomach was part of becoming someone stronger. And here's the part that feels strange to us today. Many boys wanted this. They wanted to prove themselves. They wanted to be seen as brave. Weakness wasn't just something to avoid. It was something to defeat within yourself. As age 7 approached, boys were already competing harder, running faster, wrestling longer, holding back tears even when things hurt badly. The closer they got to the Agoge, the quieter they became. Not out of fear alone, but focus. They knew what was coming. They had heard the stories. Life in the barracks, the punishments, the hunger, the training. Some boys felt excitement. Others felt dread. Most felt both. Parents knew this too. And here's where Spartan parenting becomes truly different. There were no long goodbyes planned, no emotional speeches. Parents were expected to let go, to watch their sons leave and feel pride, not sadness. A son entering the Agoge meant the family had done its job. On the final nights before separation, boys slept in their homes knowing it was temporary. Childhood was ending. The next stage would not be gentle. So when people ask why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training, this is part of the answer. because by the time training officially began, Spartan boys were already different, already hardened, already prepared in ways modern life simply does not allow. They didn't suddenly become warriors at 7. They were shaped slowly, quietly every single day. And as the sun set over Sparta and boys drifted into uneasy sleep, the city remained silent, waiting, preparing, because tomorrow, childhood would officially end, and the Agoge would begin. Chapter 4. The Agoge, a day in the life of a young trainee. The day begins before the sun is ready, long before birds think about singing, long before anyone feels like waking up. In Sparta, the Agoge does not care if you are tired. In fact, it prefers that you are. A sharp voice cuts through the darkness. Not loud, not angry, just firm. The kind of voice that expects obedience without asking for it. Boys stir on hard sleeping mats. No soft beds. No blankets worth mentioning. Just rough bedding and cold air. You sit up, blinking. Try to remember where you are. Then it hits you. You are no longer at home. You are in the Agoge. This is not school. This is not camp. This is training for survival. You are around 7 years old, maybe 8, and already your day belongs to Sparta. There is no slow morning routine, no stretching, no yawning aloud. You stand quickly. Hesitation earns attention, and attention is not something you want. Trainers, known as overseers, watch everything. They don't shout constantly. They don't need to. Their presence is enough. The first task of the day is movement. Running, always running. Barefoot on hard ground. The cold bites at your feet. Stones dig into your skin. You learn quickly how to place your steps. Not gently, carefully. There is a difference. Breathing becomes heavy. Muscles burn. No one tells you to stop. You stop when they tell you to stop, which is never when you want it to be. After running comes physical training. Wrestling, pushing, grappling. You are paired with boys your own age, sometimes bigger, sometimes stronger. Fairness is not the point. Endurance is. You fall. You get back up. You fall again. You learn how to use your weight, your balance, your anger. Crying is pointless. It does not help. It only makes things worse. And here's something important. The trainers don't rush to correct you. They let you fail. They let you struggle. Pain is a teacher here, a very strict one. Once physical training slows, you might expect food. That would make sense. You've been running and fighting for hours. Your stomach is loud, very loud. But breakfast in the Agoge is minimal, a small portion, just enough to keep you alive, not enough to make you comfortable. Hunger is part of the lesson. Spartan boys are meant to be hungry. Hungry boys learn to endure. Hungry boys learn to be clever. Hungry boys learn to steal. Yes, steal. Stealing food is allowed, encouraged even. But here's the catch. If you get caught, you are punished, not for stealing, but for being careless. The lesson is simple. Be smart, be quiet, be fast. After eating or not eating, the boys move into lessons. But don't imagine desks or scrolls. Spartan education is practical, short, sharp. Boys learn to speak briefly, to answer questions with as few words as possible. Long explanations are mocked. Silence is respected. A trainer might ask a boy a question, a hard one. The wrong answer earns punishment. The right answer earns nothing. That's just expected. Boys also learn songs and chants. Not cheerful songs. War songs. Rhythms that help soldiers march together. Songs that tell stories of past victories and honorable deaths. These are not meant to be emotional. They are meant to be remembered. As the day goes on, tasks change. Carrying loads, digging, building, anything that builds strength and patience. The sun climbs higher. Sweat mixes with dust. No one complains. No one asks for water unless allowed. Water, like food, is controlled. Then comes discipline. Sometimes you see it. Sometimes you experience it. Punishment in the Agoge is public, not cruel for entertainment, but deliberate. A boy who disobeys is punished so others learn. Pain is shared knowledge. And yet, something strange happens. You start to get used to it. Not comfortable. Never comfortable, but familiar. Your body adapts. Your mind adapts faster. You learn when to push, when to stay quiet, when to move, when to freeze. Friendships form quietly. You don't hug. You don't talk about feelings, but you share looks, small smiles, a hand helping you up after a fall. These bonds matter. One day, these boys will stand beside you in battle. The afternoon brings more training. Combat drills, wooden weapons at first, learning how to hold a shield, how to stand in formation, how to protect the man next to you, not just yourself. Individual strength matters, but unity matters more. Spartans fight as one. As evening approaches, exhaustion sets in. Your limbs feel heavy, your head feels slow, but the day is not over. There are inspections. Trainers check posture, cleanliness, behavior. A torn garment earns correction. A slouched stance earns pain. Dinner is similar to breakfast. Small, plain, unsatisfying. You eat slowly, not because you want to enjoy it, but because you want it to last. As night falls, boys return to the barracks. There is no free time in the way we understand it, but there are moments, quiet whispers, shared jokes, soft laughter quickly hidden. Even Spartans need a laugh sometimes. Before sleep, elders may speak. Short stories, reminders of duty, warnings, encouragement Spartan style, which is to say, very serious. Then you lie down, muscles aching, stomach still hungry, feet sore and dirty. Sleep comes fast, not because you're relaxed, but because you're exhausted. And tomorrow will be the same, and harder. This is why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Because for Spartan boys, a day was not something to get through. It was something to endure, over and over again, for years. And this was only the beginning of the Agoge. Chapter 5, Hunger and Deprivation. Training the body and mind. Hunger was not an accident in Sparta. It was not a mistake or a shortage of food. Hunger was a tool, a very deliberate one. In the Agoge, Spartan boys learned quickly that an empty stomach was part plan. From the moment they woke up, food was on their minds. Not because meals were exciting, but because they were never enough. Breakfast was small, dinner was small, sometimes painfully small, just enough to keep you standing. Never enough to make you full, and definitely not enough to make you comfortable. The Spartans believed comfort made people weak. Hunger, on the other hand, made people sharp. A hungry boy learned focus. He learned patience. He learned how to ignore distractions. And most importantly, he learned how to survive with very little. In a battlefield, food was never guaranteed. So Spartan boys were trained to live as if tomorrow's meal might not come. At first, hunger felt unbearable. Your stomach growled constantly. Your head felt light. Your body asked for energy that never arrived. But after days, then weeks, something strange happened. The hunger became normal. It never went away, but it stopped controlling you. And this was exactly the point. Spartan boys were taught not to complain. Complaining did nothing except attract attention. And attention, once again, was dangerous. If you complained about food, you were mocked. If you begged, you were punished. Silence was the correct response. But Sparta didn't just leave boys hungry and call it training. They gave them an option, a challenge. If you were hungry, you were allowed to steal food. Not openly, not carelessly. You had to be smart, quiet, quick. Stealing was considered a skill, a test of awareness and planning. But getting caught stealing? That was punished harshly. Not because stealing was wrong, but because getting caught showed lack of skill. Imagine that for a moment. You are starving. You see food. You know you are allowed to take it. But if anyone sees you, you are punished. Hunger pushes you to act. Fear forces you to think. This taught Spartan boys something very important. Risk assessment. Is this piece of bread worth the punishment? Is that kitchen too well guarded? Can you move silently enough? Can you wait? Many boys failed. Early on, punishment was common, but slowly boys learned. They learned when to move, when to stay still, when to walk away. Hunger sharpened the mind. Deprivation didn't stop with food. Clothing was limited. One rough garment for long periods of time. No matter the weather, cold mornings, hot afternoons. You adapted or suffered quietly. Shoes were rare. Walking barefoot toughened the skin, yes, but also trained balance and awareness. Stones heat cold, all felt clearly through the feet. Over time, pain became information instead of discomfort. Sleep was also restricted, not dramatically at first, but enough to keep boys tired. Sleep-deprived boys learn discipline fast. They learn to function even when exhausted. Because in war, you don't get to choose when you rest. Water was controlled too. You drank when allowed. You learned to pace yourself, to not waste energy complaining, to accept thirst as part of life. Now, from a modern point of view, this all sounds extreme, and it was. But for Spartan boys, it was normal. This was the world they knew. And because everyone around them lived the same way, it felt expected. And here's something important. Hunger and deprivation were not just physical tests. They were mental tests. A hungry boy learned self-control. He learned not to panic. He learned to think ahead. Hunger exposed weakness quickly. Boys who lost control struggled. Boys who adapted survived. There was also a strange sense of pride that came with endurance. A boy who could go all day with little food, little water, little rest, and still train, earned respect. Not praise, but quiet respect. And in Sparta, quiet respect was powerful. Boys began to compete silently. Who could endure the most? Who could go longest without showing weakness? These competitions were never announced. They didn't need to be. Humor still existed. Even here, boys joked quietly about food, about dreams of giant meals, about imaginary feasts. Humor helped. Laughter, even quiet laughter, reminded them they were still human. But hunger never stopped being dangerous. Boys sometimes stole too much, took risks, got caught. Punishment followed quickly. Painful reminders that hunger did not excuse stupidity. This balance between need and control was exactly what Sparta wanted. The Spartans believed a good warrior must master his desires. Hunger, fear, pain, anger, all of these had to be controlled. Not eliminated, but mastered. And hunger was the first teacher. Over time, boys learned how their bodies worked, how long they could go without eating, how to conserve energy, how to move efficiently, how to rest whenever possible. Small skills that added up. By the end of the day, hunger was still there. It followed them into sleep, a dull ache that never fully left. But it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a companion. An unpleasant one, sure, but familiar. And that familiarity mattered. Because when Spartan warriors later marched into battle, hungry and tired, they were not surprised by it. They had lived that way since childhood. This is another reason why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Not because you aren't strong, not because you aren't brave, but because modern life has trained us to avoid hunger at all costs, to snack, to rest, to comfort ourselves. Spartan boys were trained to do the opposite. They learned that hunger did not mean danger. It meant opportunity. Opportunity to prove discipline. Opportunity to prove intelligence. Opportunity to prove control. As night fell, boys lay down once more on hard bedding. Stomachs empty, bodies sore, minds tired. Hunger whispered softly, reminding them it would be back tomorrow. And tomorrow they would face it again. Because in Sparta, hunger was not a problem to be solved. It was a lesson to be learned. Chapter 6. The Pain of Discipline, Physical Challenges. Pain was everywhere in the Agoge. Not sudden pain, not shocking pain. Just steady, constant pain that followed you like a shadow. In Sparta, pain was not something to avoid. It was something to understand. From the moment Spartan boys woke up, their bodies were pushed. Muscles already sore from the day before were asked to work again. And again, there was no concept of recovery days, no rest weekends. The idea was simple. The body must learn to function even when it hurts. Running was a daily ritual. Long runs across uneven ground, up hills, through dust, sometimes in heat, sometimes in cold. Barefoot feet slapped against stone and dirt. Every step sent small jolts of pain up the legs. At first, boys tried to avoid it, tiptoeing, changing their stride. That never lasted. Eventually, they learned to accept it. Wrestling followed. This was not gentle training. Boys grappled until someone fell or gave up, and giving up was frowned upon. You learned to keep going even when your arms felt weak and your breath came in sharp gasps. Bruises were common. Scratches too. No one counted them. They were just part of the day. Falling was expected. Staying down was not. Trainers watched closely, but they did not rush to help. They believed struggle built strength. Pain showed limits. And limits were meant to be pushed, not broken recklessly, but tested again and again. Carrying heavy loads was another favorite exercise. Stones, logs, equipment, anything that weighed more than you wanted it to. Boys learned how to live properly without being taught how. Trial and error did the teaching. Back straight, legs strong. Mistakes were remembered quickly. Coal was used as training too. Spartan boys were exposed to cold water and cold air regularly. Bathing in icy rivers was common. Clothing was thin, sometimes intentionally too thin. The goal was not to suffer for no reason. The goal was to remove fear of discomfort. Cold stopped being an enemy. It became background noise. And then there was punishment. Punishment in the Agoge was physical, quick, public, often painful. A boy who disobeyed orders might be struck. A boy who showed disrespect might be whipped. Not out of anger, but instruction. The lesson was always the same. Control yourself. Strangely, punishment was not always tied to wrongdoing. Sometimes boys were punished simply to test endurance, to see how they reacted. Did they cry? Did they flinch? Did they stay silent? Silence was admired. Some punishments were infamous. Boys were whipped during ceremonies. Others were forced to stand still for long periods. Some were made to endure pain without showing reaction. These moments were not meant to break them. They were meant to harden them. And here's something important. Spartan boys were not trained to enjoy pain. That's a myth. Pain was never pleasant. But they were trained not to fear it. Fear was the real enemy. Once fear was gone, pain lost some of its power. The body adapted. Bruises healed faster. Muscles grew stronger. Endurance increased. What once felt unbearable slowly became manageable. Not easy, just manageable. And with that adaptation came confidence. Boys began to trust their bodies, to understand what they could endure, to know when to push and when to hold back just enough to survive another day. This awareness was crucial. Reckless strength was useless. Controlled strength was everything. There was also discipline in posture and movement. Spartan boys were trained to stand tall, shoulders back, eyes forward. Slouching was corrected, not gently. Your body language mattered. It showed confidence. It showed readiness. Even walking was a lesson. Slow, controlled, purposeful, no wasted movement. Running was fast and efficient. Fighting was direct. Everything had intention. And yes, there were injuries, sprains, cuts, broken bones sometimes. Medical care was basic. Pain was expected. Recovery happened while training continued. Boys learned how to work around pain, how to adapt. This might sound cruel, and in many ways it was, but to the Spartans, this was preparation. They believed war was far more cruel than training. Better to suffer now than fail later. There was also an unspoken rule among boys. You didn't show weakness in front of others. If you were hurt, you dealt with it quietly. Complaining earned ridicule. Respect came from endurance. That doesn't mean boys didn't feel pain. They did, deeply, but they learned to separate pain from panic. Pain became information. Panic was dangerous. Humor helped again. Quiet jokes, small comments, laughing at shared misery. A joke during pain made it easier to endure. Even in Sparta, humor survived. As days turned into weeks, weeks into months, physical challenges became routine. Hard, yes, but predictable. The real challenge was consistency. Never knowing when the next test would come. Never knowing when you would be pushed harder than before. And that uncertainty trained the mind as much as the body. This is another reason you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Because modern life teaches us to stop when something hurts, to rest, to recover, to protect ourselves. Spartan life taught the opposite. Pain was not a signal to stop. It was a signal to focus. By nightfall, bodies were exhausted. Muscles screamed quietly. Bones ached. Sleep came fast. But even in sleep, pain lingered. A dull reminder that tomorrow would bring more. And tomorrow, the trainers would expect improvement. Not comfort, not excuses. Improvement. Because in Sparta, physical strength was not a gift. It was something carved into you, one painful day at a time. And as the boys drifted into uneasy sleep, their bodies learned a simple truth. Pain was temporary. Discipline was permanent. Chapter 7, Combat Training, Learning to Kill. At some point in the Agoge, training changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. The running is still there. The hunger is still there. The pain never leaves. But now, the purpose becomes clearer. This is no longer just about endurance. This is about combat. Spartan boys are slowly introduced to weapons. At first, nothing sharp. Wooden spears, practice swords, heavy shields that feel too big for their bodies. The weight is intentional. A shield is not just protection. It is responsibility. Drop it, and you endanger the man next to you. From the beginning, boys are taught one thing very clearly. You do not fight alone. Combat training starts with stance. How to stand without wasting energy. Feet planted, knees bent, shield held firm. Spear angled just right. Trainers correct posture constantly. A small mistake in stance can mean death later. Movements are repeated over and over. Step, thrust, pull back, shield up, step again. The drills are slow at first, almost boring. But boredom is part of the lesson. You must be able to fight even when your mind is tired. Then the pace increases. Boys spar with each other. At first gently, then harder. Mistakes hurt. A wooden spear to the ribs still hurts. A shield to the face hurts a lot. Bruises form quickly. But the goal is not to win. The goal is to learn control. Control is everything. Spartan boys are taught not to fight with anger. Anger clouds judgment. Fear does too. The best warrior is calm, focused, quiet. Trainers watch reactions closely. A boy who panics is corrected. A boy who loses control is punished. Combat is treated as skill, not emotion. As boys grow stronger, drills become more complex. Group formations are introduced. The Phalanx, shield walls, moving as one unit. This is where Spartan combat becomes truly terrifying. You are taught to trust the boy next to you with your life. Your shield protects him. His shield protects you. If one breaks formation, everyone suffers. Individual bravery means nothing if it breaks unity. This idea is drilled constantly. Boys practice advancing together, retreating together, turning together, even falling together. Communication is minimal. A glance, a movement, a signal. Words are slow. Bodies react faster. Eventually, real weapons are introduced. Sharper blades, heavier spears, still controlled. But now mistakes matter more. Fear creeps in. Trainers notice. Fear is addressed quickly. Sometimes through instruction, sometimes through pain. The Spartans believed fear must be faced directly, not avoided. If a boy flinched too much, he was pushed harder. If he hesitated, he was forced to repeat drills until hesitation faded. Learning to kill was never explained openly. No long speeches about morality. It was understood. You train to survive. You train to protect Sparta. The enemy is not humanized. The enemy is a threat. This mindset was taught carefully. Combat training also included endurance fighting. Long sessions where boys fought while exhausted, hungry, thirsty. This was intentional. Battles rarely happen when you are rested and fed. Boys learn how sloppy movements appear when tired, how mistakes increase, how discipline matters more when strength fades. And still, humor survived. Quiet jokes after training, teasing about missed strikes, laughter when someone slipped and fell. These moments mattered. They kept boys human. But there was always an edge. Combat training was serious. Injuries were real, sometimes severe. Trainers did not panic. Injury was risk. Risk was accepted. Boys were also taught how to endure wounds, how to keep moving even when hurt, how to ignore pain long enough to finish a fight. Medical care existed, but it was basic. Endurance was expected. One of the hardest lessons was restraint. Not striking when told to stop. Not continuing when an opponent was down. Control mattered. A warrior who could not control himself was dangerous to his own side. As years passed, combat drills became second nature. Movements happened without thought. Bodies reacted before minds caught up. This was the goal. Instinct trained by repetition. At night, boys lay awake replaying drills in their minds. Thrust, block, step, shield, again and again. Sleep came with the weight of exhaustion and focus. This is where many boys broke. Not physically, mentally. Some lost motivation. Some grew quiet. Some struggled to keep up. The Agoge was designed to reveal weakness over time. Those who could not adapt suffered greatly, and yet many endured. They endured because they had been prepared since birth. Hunger had trained their minds. Pain had trained their bodies. Discipline had shaped their behavior. Combat training was simply the final step. This is why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan combat training. Not because you lack courage, but because modern life does not teach us to stay calm while someone swings a weapon at us. It teaches us to avoid danger, not walk toward it. Spartan boys were taught to move toward danger together. As night falls once more, the training grounds grow quiet. Weapons are clean, shields stacked, bruised hands ache, muscles throb. But there is also pride, not pride in victory, pride in endurance. Because today they face combat, and tomorrow they will face it again. And each day they become a little less like boys, and a little more like Spartan warriors. Chapter 8: Education in Obedience and Strategy. In Sparta, learning did not happen in quiet rooms with scrolls and teachers speaking softly. Education happened everywhere, in the way you stood, in how quickly you obeyed, in how you thought before you moved. For a Spartan boy, learning was not about knowing many things. It was about knowing the right thing to do at the right moment without being told twice. Obedience came first. From early in the Agoge, boys learned that hesitation was dangerous. Orders were expected to be followed immediately, not quickly. Immediately, a pause, even a short one, showed doubt, and doubt was weakness. Trainers didn't explain their commands. They didn't need to. A Spartan warrior was expected to act, not question. This did not mean boys were mindless. Quite the opposite. Obedience was paired with awareness. Boys learned to read situations fast, to understand intent without words, to anticipate what might come next. Think of it like this. You are running drills. A trainer raises his hand. No words. You stop. He lowers it. You move. He changes direction suddenly. You follow. Over time, these signals become instinct. Your body reacts before your thoughts catch up. This was the goal. Spartan strategy began with simplicity. No complex theories. No long discussions. Just clear rules. Hold the line. Protect the man beside you. Do not break formation. Do not chase. Do not retreat unless ordered. These rules were repeated endlessly, not shouted, just reinforced through action. If you broke formation during training, you were corrected. Physically, publicly, the lesson stayed with you. As boys grew older, strategy became more refined. They learned how terrain mattered. Hills, narrow paths, open fields, where to stand, where not to stand, how sunlight could blind an enemy, how silence could confuse them. But these lessons were short, almost casual. A trainer might point to a hill and ask a question. A boy would answer in a few words. Long explanations were cut off. Spartan speech was meant to be sharp and useful. This way of speaking had a purpose. In battle, there is no time for long sentences. Boys also learn to observe people, to read expressions, to notice fear, to notice confidence. Trainers sometimes ask boys to describe what they saw in others, not feelings, behaviors. Who looked tired, who looked alert, who hesitated. These skills mattered later. A warrior who could read the enemy had an advantage. Obedience was reinforced through discipline. If a boy questioned an order openly, punishment followed. But questioning in private, in the right way, was sometimes allowed for older boys. Sparta valued efficiency. If something truly didn't work, it could be adjusted, but this was rare, and only for those who had proven themselves. Most boys learned quickly. Obey first. Think while moving. Group strategy was practiced constantly. Formation drills, timing drills, silence drills. Boys learned to move together without speaking. Feet hit the ground at the same time. Shields rose together. Spears moved as one. At first, it felt awkward, then unnatural, then normal, and then comforting. There's something calming about knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. Spartan boys found security in structure. The rules were harsh, but they were clear, and clarity reduces fear. Trainers sometimes tested obedience in unexpected ways. Orders that seemed pointless, tasks that felt unfair. The point was not the task. The point was response. Did the boy obey without frustration? Did he stay focused? A boy who complained was corrected. A boy who adapted quietly earned respect. Strategy also included patience, not attacking too early, not reacting emotionally, waiting. Boys were taught that rushing into action often led to disaster. Holding position was often harder than charging forward. This lesson was drilled into them repeatedly. Boys also learned about past battles, not through long stories, but through short examples. They charged too early. They broke formation. They held the line. These phrases carried meaning. Everyone understood the consequences. Even games were used to teach strategy. Team challenges where communication was limited. Tasks where boys had to work together without planning ahead. These games revealed leaders naturally. Some boys guided with movement, others with timing. Leadership in Sparta was quiet. No speeches, no shouting, just action. As boys matured, obedience became second nature. They didn't feel controlled. They felt aligned. Their actions matched expectations automatically. This freed mental energy for awareness and decision-making. This is another reason why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Modern life encourages choice, expression, individual preference. Spartan life demanded alignment with the group, with the mission, with the state. Spartan boys were not trained to ask, "What do I want?" They were trained to ask, "What must be done?" And once that question was answered, they acted. At night, after long days of training and discipline, boys rested quietly. Minds replayed drills, signals, movements, not because they were forced to, but because it had become natural. Strategy lived in their muscles now. As sleep took over, the lessons settled deeper. Obedience without fear. Strategy without hesitation. Action without doubt. This was the Spartan way. Not loud, not dramatic, precise. And tomorrow, it will be tested again. Chapter 9, the test of endurance, sleeping, working, and fighting. Endurance in Sparta was not tested in one dramatic moment. It was tested slowly, quietly, day after day. The Spartans did not ask, "How strong are you right now?" They asked, "How long can you keep going?" Sleep was the first thing taken away. Spartan boys did sleep, of course, but never enough. Nights were short. Beds were hard. There were no pillows worth mentioning. Often, boys slept on reeds they gathered themselves, cut by hand from nearby land. If you chose bad reeds, too sharp or too thin, that was your problem. Tomorrow, your back would remind you. Sleep came fast because exhaustion demanded it, but it never felt deep. Sounds in the barracks, shifting bodies, coughs, the quiet pain of sore muscles, and always the knowledge that morning would come too soon. Waking up tired became normal. Spartan boys learned how to function without rest. Eyes burned, heads felt heavy, but training continued. There were no excuses for being tired. Everyone was tired. That was the point. This taught a powerful lesson. You don't wait to feel ready. You act anyway. After waking, the day moved quickly into work. Physical work. Useful work. Boys were not just trained to fight. They were trained to serve the system that supported fighting. Carrying supplies. Maintaining training grounds. Building simple structures. Digging. Cleaning. None of this was glamorous. But it mattered. Work taught discipline and motion. You learn how to pace yourself. Rush too fast and you burn out. Move too slow and you get noticed. The best workers move steadily. Calm, efficient, trainers watch quietly. Endurance showed itself in posture, in breathing, in consistency. A boy who stayed steady earned respect. A boy who collapsed dramatically did not. Working while tired was intentional. So was working while hungry. So was working while sore. Spartans believed true endurance appeared only when comfort was gone, and when work ended, training resumed. Fighting drills were often placed at the worst possible time, late in the day, when energy was lowest, when minds were slow. This was not an accident. Battles rarely happened when soldiers felt fresh. Boys learned how their bodies behaved under exhaustion. Movements became sloppy. Reactions slowed. Trainers corrected this immediately. Even when tired, discipline mattered. This was one of the hardest lessons. Anyone can fight when they feel strong. Only trained warriors fight well when they feel weak. Some days were worse than others. Longer runs, heavier loads, less food, less sleep. Boys never knew what kind of day they were waking up to. That uncertainty was part of the test. Endurance is not just physical, it is mental. Knowing that tomorrow might be harder than today, and continuing anyway, require control. Boys learn not to think too far ahead. Focus on the next task, the next step, the next breath. This mindset kept them sane. At times, boys were sent on long marches, carrying gear, barefoot, over rough ground. Silence was expected. No talking, just movement. Step after step, mile after mile. Feet blistered, legs ached, shoulders burned. But the march continued. During these marches, boys learned something important. Pain changes over time. At first, it is sharp, then loud, then dull, then distant. Eventually, it becomes background noise. Understanding this helped them endure. Endurance was also tested emotionally. Spartan boys lived away from family. No comforting words. No reassurance. Loneliness was real, especially at night, especially for younger boys. But loneliness was not discussed. It was endured quietly. Boys learned to rely on each other instead. Shared silence became comfort. Even illness was handled with endurance in mind. Minor sickness was ignored. Training continued unless a boy was truly unable to stand. Rest was rare. Recovery happened during motion. This might sound reckless, but Spartans believed warriors could not depend on perfect conditions. You fight sick. You march hurt. You endure. And yet, the system was not completely careless. Boys who truly could not continue were noticed, but sympathy was limited. Survival of the group mattered more than the comfort of the individual. As weeks turned into months, endurance became identity. Boys took pride in how much they could endure, who could stay awake the longest, who could work without slowing, who could fight at the end of the day as well as at the start. These were unspoken competitions, quiet challenges, no winners announced, no losers named. Everyone knew there were moments of breaking, boys who collapsed, boys who froze, boys who cried. These moments were not mocked cruelly. They were corrected, strengthened, or sometimes accepted as limits. Not everyone thrived in the Agoge, but those who did grew different. They learned that sleep is useful but not required. That rest is helpful but not guaranteed. That comfort is temporary. Endurance is reliable. This is another reason why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Because modern life teaches us to stop when we are tired, to rest when we feel overwhelmed, to listen to discomfort as a warning. Spartan life taught the opposite. Tiredness was expected. Overwhelm was normal. Discomfort was not danger. It was information. At night, boys collapsed onto hard bedding once more, muscles shaking softly, minds foggy. Sleep arrived quickly, not peacefully, but deeply, because exhaustion always wins eventually. And before sleep fully claimed them, many boys thought the same thought. I made it through today. Not proudly, not loudly, quietly, because tomorrow, the test of endurance would begin again. Chapter 10, Mentors and Elders, Guidance and Punishment. In Sparta, boys were never alone. Even when they felt alone, someone was always watching. Not parents, not teachers like you imagine them, but elders, older men, veterans, citizens who had survived the Agoge themselves and now served as its living memory. These men were not gentle mentors. They were not warm, but they were deeply involved in shaping Spartan boys into warriors. Every boy was assigned older figures to observe him. These mentors were not there to explain things slowly. They were there to correct, punish, guide, and judge. And they did all of it with very few words. Spartans believed wisdom came from experience, not speeches. So elders rarely talked unless needed. When they did speak, boys listened carefully. A single sentence could stay with a boy for years. Elders watched everything. How boys walked, how they stood, how they ate, how they reacted when tired or hurt. Nothing was too small. A boy who slouched was corrected. A boy who laughed at the wrong moment was corrected. A boy who showed fear was corrected. Correction was not always physical. Sometimes it was a stare, a pause, a slow shake of the head. In Sparta, disappointment carried weight, but often correction meant punishment. Punishment was quick, simple, and unforgettable. A blow from a stick, extra physical work, being forced to stand silently for hours, removal of food, removal of rest. Punishment was never explained in detail. Boys were expected to understand what they did wrong. If they didn't, they learned soon enough. This taught awareness. You learned to think before acting, to read the room, to notice the unspoken rules. Spartan elders believed discipline created freedom, not freedom to relax, but freedom to act correctly without hesitation. And mentors did more than punish. They tested. Elders often asked boys questions. Simple questions. Hard answers. What makes a good Spartan? What matters more, strength or obedience? Why do we endure pain? There were no right answers. What mattered was how the boy responded. Calm or defensive. Thoughtful or rushed. Honest or performative. A boy who tried too hard impressed no one. A boy who spoke clearly and briefly earned respect. This was how Spartans trained the mind, not through long lessons, but through constant pressure. Older warriors also served as examples. Boys watched how they moved, how they spoke, how they carried themselves. These men did not boast. They did not complain. They did not rush. Silence was strength. Calm was control. Even anger was measured. If an elder punished a boy, it was done without emotion. No shouting, no rage, just action. This showed boys that punishment was not personal. It was corrective. In Sparta, emotions were not ignored. They were mastered. Some elders formed closer bonds with certain boys. Not affectionate bonds, but focused ones. They took responsibility for shaping that boy's behavior. Success reflected well on the mentor. Failure reflected poorly. This created pressure on both sides. A boy did not want to embarrass his mentor. A mentor did not want to be responsible for a weak Spartan. Guidance came through small moments. A hand correcting posture. A quiet word after training. A nod of approval. Approval mattered. Spartans did not praise often. So when it came, it stayed with you. Punishment, however, was common and public. boys were punished in front of others. This was intentional. Shame reinforced memory. But it was not cruel humiliation. It was controlled exposure. You learn not just from your own punishment, but from watching others. A boy who broke formation learned one lesson. 10 boys watching learned it too, to save time. Spartan training was efficient. Some punishments tested endurance rather than obedience. Standing motionless, holding heavy objects, maintaining balance while exhausted. These punishments taught control. You learn how to endure discomfort without reacting, without fidgeting, without showing frustration. This skill mattered in battle. An arrow doesn't care if you're uncomfortable. The presence of elders also reminded boys of the future. These men were living proof of survival. Scarred, calm, hardened by years of discipline. They showed boys what awaited them if they endured. Not glory, not riches, respect, and belonging. Elders also enforced Spartan values outside formal training. During meals, during rest, during silence, there was no off switch. A boy could be corrected at any time. This constant observation trained self-regulation. You behave correctly not because someone watched, but because someone might be watching. Eventually, boys internalized this. Discipline became automatic. This is another reason you wouldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Because modern life allows private weakness. Spartan life did not. There were no safe moments to collapse emotionally. No space to complain. No audience for excuses. And yet, within this harsh system, something surprising existed. Trust. Boys trusted elders to shape them correctly. Elders trusted boys to absorb lessons. This trust was built through consistency. Rules did not change. Punishments were predictable. Expectations were clear. There was comfort in this. Harsh but stable. By the time boys reached their later teenage years, elders spoke to them differently. Less correction, more expectation. Silence meant approval, and that silence meant everything. By surviving the guidance and punishment of elders, boys learned something essential. They were no longer controlled from the outside. They were controlled from within. Discipline had moved into the mind, and once that happened, a Spartan no longer needed constant supervision. He became his own mentor and his own judge. Chapter 11. Hunger Games, Food, Theft, and Survival. In Sparta, hunger was not a problem to be solved. It was a lesson. Spartan boys were fed just enough to survive. Not enough to feel full. Not enough to feel satisfied. Just enough to keep moving. The feeling of hunger was constant, like a quiet voice that never stopped talking. At first, it was distracting. Stomachs growled during training. Heads felt light. Focus slipped. But over time, hunger became familiar, almost normal. This was intentional. Spartans believed a warrior should never depend on abundance. Food might not come on time. Supplies could run out. Hunger could follow soldiers for days during campaigns. So boys were trained to function while hungry. Meals were simple. Thin broth, small portions of grain, sometimes a bit of meat. Nothing exciting, nothing comforting. Eating was quick and quiet. No talking, no complaining. If you finished and wanted more, that was your problem. But Sparta had a solution for that. Steal it. Yes, Spartan boys were encouraged to steal food. Not openly, not lazily, but cleverly. They were expected to sneak, plan, observe, and take food without being caught. This taught survival skills, awareness, timing, patience. But there was a rule. If you got caught, you were punished. Not for stealing, for failing. This is important. Stealing itself was not wrong. Being careless was. This created a strange system. Boys became skilled thieves. They learned how to move quietly, how to watch guards, how to notice patterns, how to wait for the right moment. A careless boy learned pain. Punishment for getting caught was harsh. Whippings, beatings, public correction, sometimes severe, not because the elders were angry, but because failure needed to be remembered, and remembered it was. After one punishment, boys became much better at stealing. This trained adaptability. You learned to solve problems creatively. Food was motivation. Hunger sharpened the mind. A hungry boy thought differently. He noticed things others missed. A loaf left unattended, a distracted guard, a loose latch, a moment of shadow. This wasn't about turning boys into criminals. It was about teaching them how to survive in hostile conditions. In war, supplies are never guaranteed. Spartans wanted warriors who could adapt. Some boys became very good at this, almost legendary. Stories spread quietly through the Agoge. Who stole from where, who avoided capture the longest, who dared the riskiest theft. These stories were never officially praised, but everyone knew respect grew silently. Hunger also taught restraint. A boy who stole too much risked attention. A boy who rushed made mistakes. You learned to take only what you needed. Greed was dangerous. Sharing was another lesson. Boys often shared stolen food with those who struggled, not out of kindness, but strategy. A stronger group survived better. Weak boys slowed everyone down. Spartan cooperation was practical. Even hunger was communal. But hunger did more than train the body and mind. It tested character. A hungry boy faced constant temptation. Break rules. Get caught. Take shortcuts. Fight over scraps. Some boys did. Those boys didn't last. Spartans believed hunger revealed who you truly were. Calm or desperate. Patient or reckless. Self-controlled or impulsive. And hunger never fully went away. Even as boys grew older, meals remained limited. The famous Spartan black broth was filling, but not comforting. Outsiders hated it. Spartans tolerated it. That alone tells you a lot. Hunger also prepared boys for worse conditions. Long marches with no food. Days of fighting on empty stomachs. Sleeping hungry. Waking hungry. Moving anyway. Modern people struggle when meals are late by an hour. Spartan boys learned to ignore hunger entirely. This is another reason you wouldn't survive a day in Spartan training. Because hunger makes everything harder. Concentration drops. Emotions rise. Patience disappears. Sparta removed comfort on purpose. And yet, hunger also bonded the boys. Shared hunger creates connection. Quiet jokes. Secret exchanges. Smiles after successful thefts. Small victories mattered more when you were hungry. A piece of bread felt like treasure. This taught appreciation. It also taught that survival was earned. No one handed you comfort. You created it. Sometimes elders set traps. Obvious food left out. Boys watched carefully. Those who rushed were caught easily. Those who waited survived. This taught caution. Not everything that looks like opportunity is safe. Hunger sharpened instincts. Over time, boys stopped thinking about food constantly. Hunger became background noise. Something to acknowledge, then ignore. This was the goal. When hunger no longer controlled you, you controlled yourself. That is power. Spartans believed discipline mattered more than strength. Hunger trained discipline better than comfort ever could. By the end of their training, boys no longer asked, "When do we eat?" They asked, "What we do next?" And that mindset followed them into adulthood. Even as soldiers, Spartans ate simply. No feasts, no indulgence. Food was fuel, not pleasure. This shocked outsiders. Other Greek soldiers brought cooks, wine, comfort items. Spartans brought discipline. and it worked. So when you imagine Spartan training, don't just think of battles and weapons. Think of hunger, constant, quiet, sharp. Think of boys learning to steal silently in the dark. Think of punishment for mistakes. Think of empty stomachs and focused minds. That was Spartan survival, and you haven't even picked up a weapon yet. Chapter 12, Weapons Before Childhood Ends, Learning to Kill. At some point in the Agoge, play ends, not with loud announcement, not with a ceremony, not with drama. It just happens quietly. The games, the teasing, the small jokes, they become background noise. Weapons appear, and suddenly the stakes feel real. The lesson is simple. If you want to survive, you must learn to kill. It starts small. Wooden swords, spears that are heavy but blunt, shields that feel bigger than your small body can manage. The weight is intentional. It teaches control. A dropped shield could cost someone's life later. In Sparta, individual mistakes endanger the group. The first lessons are about stance. Feet planted firmly, knees bent slightly, shield angled just right, spear held with tension, ready to move. Trainers correct posture constantly. Tiny mistakes are punished quietly but firmly. It doesn't matter if you are small, young, or scared. The body must obey. At first, the drills are slow. Step, thrust, block, step again. Shield raised. Step, breathe, repeat. It might seem boring, even endless, but boredom is part of the lesson. In battle, moments are long, quiet, and exhausting. You must stay focused even when your mind wants to wander. Then, the pace picks up. Sparring begins. Boys are paired with others. Sometimes bigger, sometimes faster, sometimes smarter. You are never guaranteed an easy match. The goal is not to win. The goal is to survive, to act without fear, to react without hesitation. Pain is present. A wooden spear to the chest stings. A shield to the shoulder leaves marks. Falling is expected. Staying down is unacceptable. Endurance is learned in every bruise, every scraped knee. Control is everything. Boys are taught not to fight with anger. Anger clouds judgment. Fear clouds judgment. The Spartan warrior must remain calm, focused, quiet, watching every movement, calculating, reacting, surviving. Trainers watch carefully. They test reaction under stress. Flinch too much and punishment follows. Hesitate and you repeat drills. Mistake after mistake is used as teaching, not cruelty. Pain is not punishment for punishment's sake. It is a teacher. As boys grow, drills increase in complexity. They learn group tactics, formation fighting, the Phalanx, shield walls that move as one, step together, strike together, fall together, stand together. In Sparta, individual heroics are meaningless if the group fails. This is drilled endlessly. Every movement is synchronized. Every glance counts. A flinch or hesitation can compromise a line. Coordination is drilled into muscle memory. Boys learn instinctively how to act without thinking. Thought is a luxury you don't always have in battle. Weapons become heavier, edges sharper, strikes faster, mistakes hurt more. Fear creeps in naturally. Trainers notice. Fear is addressed immediately, sometimes through instruction, often through pain. This is how boys learn to kill. Slowly, methodically, carefully, every strike controlled, every defense precise, every moment intentional. Morality is never discussed directly, not at this age. The enemy is a threat. Survival is a priority. Discipline ensures focus. Control ensures effectiveness. Endurance fighting is introduced. Hours-long sessions where boys spar while exhausted. Hunger presses on the mind. Fatigue weighs on the body. The lesson is clear. Real combat is rarely convenient. You will fight while tired, hungry, injured, and you must continue. Some boys break, not physically, mentally. The exhaustion, the pain, the constant pressure. Some cannot endure. The Agoge is designed to reveal weakness over time. Those who cannot adapt struggle. Those who persevere are strengthened. Humor still exists quietly. Whispered jokes after drills. Small smirks when someone stumbles. Laughter is fleeting but allowed. It reminds boys they are still human, even under constant pressure. Injuries are common. Cuts, sprains, bruises, occasionally more severe. Spartan medical care is basic. You learn to continue despite pain. Injury becomes information. Adaptation becomes instinct. Restraint is another lesson. You must not strike when told to stop. You must not continue against orders. Control is more valuable than aggression. A warrior without control is a danger to his own side. By late adolescence, weapons handling becomes second nature. Muscles move instinctively. Reactions are sharp. Decision-making is instantaneous. Combat becomes a language of body and mind. At night, boys replay drills in their minds. Step, block, strike, shield, again and again. Sleep comes with exhaustion pressing down, but focus lingers. The lessons sink into muscle memory. Instinct takes over thought, and the hardest lesson remains. You may feel fear, you may feel doubt, you may feel pain, but action must continue. Hesitation is fatal. Control is everything. Discipline is survival. By the time Spartan boys reach adulthood, these lessons are internalized. Weapons are an extension of the body. Combat is instinct. Fear is acknowledged, then set aside. Hunger, pain, exhaustion, they become background noise. This is why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan weapons training. Not because you aren't brave, not because you aren't clever, but because modern life shields you from discomfort, risk, and responsibility. It doesn't teach you to strike calmly while exhausted, barefoot, hungry, and afraid. Sparta did. Every day. For years. By dawn, the young warriors of Sparta are changed. Not by a single event. Not by sudden inspiration. But by repetition. By discipline. By pain. By hunger. By obedience. By the slow, quiet mastery of weapons and self. And tomorrow, the training will begin again. Because in Sparta, learning to kill isn't a choice. It's a necessity. Chapter 13, Brotherhood and Competition. Rivalry that builds warriors. Sparta was not just about fighting. Not just about enduring hunger, pain, or fear. It was also about each other. Boys were thrown together in groups from a young age. They trained together, ate together, slept in the same rooms. They competed together. They fought together. And slowly, they became a unit, a brotherhood. But brotherhood in Sparta was strange. It wasn't all hugs and trust falls. It was built on competition. Constant, quiet, sometimes brutal competition. Every day, boys tested each other. Who could run fastest? Who could lift the heaviest log? Who could spar longest without giving in? Who could endure pain silently while everyone else watched? The tests were endless, not announced, not official, just part of daily life. And everyone was aware. Everyone was measured against everyone else. This created tension, rivalry, frustration, but it also created growth. You couldn't afford to be lazy because your neighbor was watching. And if your neighbor surpassed you, you had to push harder. Yet the rivalry was not personal. It was practical. It was not about being the best individually. It was about being strong enough to contribute to the group. A weak boy could endanger everyone in battle. A strong boy lifted the whole unit. At first, This felt unfair. You could be exhausted, hungry, injured, and still someone was faster, stronger, or cleverer than you. You had to keep up or fall behind. And in Sparta, falling behind was dangerous. But over time, the rivalry became motivating. Boys began to push each other in subtle ways. A nudge, a glance, a quick comment. Step faster. Hold tighter. Don't flinch. It wasn't cruelty. It was expectation. And the boys internalized it. Competition also taught humility. Losing was not shameful. Complaining was. You learned to accept defeat, analyze mistakes, and try again. Every loss was a lesson. Every win was fuel for the next challenge. Brotherhood also taught cooperation. Even while competing, boys had to act together. The Phalanx required trust. You couldn't let a rival fall in battle. Your shield protected him. His shield protected you. Individual competition was always balanced with group responsibility. This balance was delicate. Too selfish, and you were dangerous. Too weak, and you were a burden. Spartan boys learned to find a middle ground. Assert yourself, but not at the cost of others. Mentors encouraged this. Elders would notice subtle rivalries and push them further. A competition over strength or speed could last weeks, all under quiet observation. Mistakes were corrected. Victories recognized silently. Rivalry also taught strategy. Boys learned when to push ahead, when to hold back, and how to anticipate others' actions. Reading a friend's behavior became as important as reading an enemy's. You learned to judge patience, risk, and timing, all in small exercises. Even humor played a role. Whispered jokes during training, teasing when someone fell, small bets on who would finish first. Laughter reminded boys they were human. Even warriors in training needed moments of lightness. At night, the boys reflected on the day. Who had outperformed whom? Who had endured silently while others faltered? Who had made a mistake in sparring or formation? These reflections were private but meaningful. They fueled tomorrow's training. Brotherhood was also emotional. Boys cared for each other quietly. A friend in pain might receive a small helping hand or a whispered encouragement. You protected those you trained with, not because you were told to, but because survival depended on it. This quiet loyalty was rare in the wider world. But in Sparta, it was essential. Brothers in training were also brothers in arms. Losing one could mean disaster. The balance between competition and cooperation created a unique culture. Boys could be fierce rivals in drills and sparring, yet stand shoulder to shoulder in formation. They learned that individual pride mattered less than the group's survival. By the time they reached late adolescence, boys had internalized these lessons. They pushed themselves because others pushed them. They endured pain because they saw others endure. They trained because they could not let the group down. Modern life struggles to replicate this. We cheer individual success. We reward personal achievement. Spartan life demanded collective excellence. Rivalry without responsibility was useless. Cooperation without effort was meaningless. And here's the tricky part. This brotherhood was forged under constant stress. Hunger, exhaustion, pain, punishment, competition. That combination created bonds far deeper than friendship. It was a connection built on shared endurance and shared survival. In battle, this connection mattered more than courage. A boy who trusted his brothers would stand firm. A boy who doubted his brothers would falter. Spartan training ensured no one doubted. By training under stress together, enduring together, competing together, the bonds became instinctive. Quietly, almost imperceptibly, the boys transformed. They were no longer children. They were part of a machine, a unit, a brotherhood where every action had meaning and every decision affected someone else. This is why you couldn't survive a day in Spartan brotherhood. Not because it is cruel, not because it is harsh, but because modern life rarely tests loyalty, endurance, and competitiveness all at once, every day. In Sparta, you were never allowed to relax your effort. You were never allowed to forget your companions. You were never allowed to stop improving. The brotherhood demanded it. By nightfall, boys collapsed side by side, bruised, hungry, exhausted, but their minds were alert. Their bodies remembered every push, every fall, every test. Every rivalry from the day fueled quiet pride and anticipation for tomorrow. Because tomorrow, the games, the tests, the silent competitions would continue. And each day, they were not just surviving, they were becoming Spartan warriors. Chapter 14, Mock Battles, Preparing for Real War. By now, Spartan boys had endured hunger, pain, and endless drills. They had learned discipline, obedience, and survival. They had built strength, stamina, and mental focus. They had competed, stolen, and trained with weapons. And slowly, quietly, it all began to come together. The next step was mock battles. At first, these battles were small. Just a few boys on each side, shields raised, wooden spears in hand. Trainers watched carefully. Movements were slow. Mistakes were corrected immediately. The point was not victory. The point was precision, awareness, and control. Even at this stage, fear crept in. Unlike drills, these mock battles were unpredictable. You couldn't rely on repetition alone. You had to react, anticipate, adjust. The first lessons in real combat often come with shock. A boy swings too quickly. Another stumbles. Chaos looms. And that is the lesson. Chaos is normal. Chaos is expected. Chaos is survival. As boys grew stronger, the battles increased in scale. More participants, heavier equipment, longer engagements, larger spaces, simulated battlefields, hills, narrow paths, open plains. All the terrain of war was introduced slowly, so the boys could adapt. Rules became more complex. Formations mattered. Timing mattered. Signals mattered. Boys learned to move as one body, not as individuals. A single misstep could break the line. A single hesitation could spell defeat. The mock battles were physically demanding. Hours of marching, positioning, striking, blocking. Shield grew heavy. Arms ached. Legs burned. Fatigue was part of the training. But fatigue was also part battle. The boys learned to fight even when exhausted, even when sore, even when their stomachs rumbled with hunger. Pain became secondary. Awareness came first. Survival came first. Control came first. Mistakes were punished. Not harshly, but clearly. Drop your shield? Extra drills. Miss a strike? Start over. Hesitate in formation? Repeat the movement until flawless. The goal was mastery, not humiliation. Observation was constant. Trainers would stop the mock battle at any moment to correct a movement. Sometimes boys would be repositioned, reassigned, or forced to replay sections repeatedly. There was no shame in correction, but there was expectation. You learned fast, or you suffered through repetition. Mock battles also taught adaptation. Not every scenario was predictable. Trainers introduced obstacles, sudden attacks, or surprises. A boy might be attacked from behind while his team advanced. He had to respond instantly, ignore pain, focus on the enemy, protect his comrades. These exercises taught split-second decision-making. Life and death were simulated, but the intensity was real. Boys learned to trust instincts, to trust training, to trust their brothers beside them. Competition still existed, but differently. Victory was secondary. Survival, precision, and coordination were primary. A boy could be the strongest in his unit, but if he broke formation, he endangered everyone. In mock battles, individual skill was useless without teamwork. Some boys excelled. They anticipated attacks, moved with fluidity, and protected weaker teammates instinctively. These boys gained quiet respect, not from boasting, not from speeches, from action. Their bodies and minds proved themselves. Others struggled. Panic, hesitation, fatigue, hunger. Any of these had overwhelmed a boy, but failure was not permanent. Mock battles were repeated endlessly. Each day offered another chance. Each error became a lesson. Spartan boys also learned subtlety. Not every engagement required brute strength. Strategy, observation, timing, and patience could win more than raw power. Sometimes waiting a heartbeat longer, moving slightly differently, or reacting to a signal could decide the outcome. This taught foresight, the ability to anticipate consequences, the ability to weigh risk against reward. Humor, though rare, persisted quietly. Whispered comments when someone fell awkwardly, a sly grin after a clever maneuver. These moments reminded boys they were still alive, still human, still capable of joy. By nightfall, mock battles concluded. Boys collapsed, sweaty, bruised, and exhausted. Some quietly laughed at minor mistakes. Some silently reflected on lessons learned. Training never truly ended. It simply transitioned into rest before the next challenge. Through these exercises, boys learned a critical Spartan principle. Real war is nothing like training, but training is everything for real war. Pain, hunger, fatigue, fear, and pressure, all simulated, but all preparing the boys for reality. Mock battles were designed to teach endurance under realistic conditions, to push beyond comfort, to sharpen instincts, to make instinctive reactions possible even when the body is screaming to stop. By the end of this stage, boys were no longer playing. They were soldiers in training. Weapons were extensions of their bodies. Movements were automatic. Decisions were split-second. Discipline ruled over emotion. Fear was acknowledged, then set aside. And yet, despite the intensity, mock battles retained one essential quality: trust. Trust in training. Trust in mentors. Trust in brothers beside you. Without that trust, formation would collapse. Shields would fail. Spears would miss. Units would break. Mock battles were Spartan life condensed into hours. The fatigue, coordination, strategy, and endurance of years. Everything distilled into controlled chaos. And this chaos was a lesson in survival. This is why you couldn't survive a day in a Spartan mock battle. Not because it is impossible to swing a wooden sword or carry a heavy shield, but because modern life does not train endurance under constant, unpredictable pressure. Modern life does not simulate life and death consequences for every hesitation. Sparta did, every day, for years. By the time boys lay down to sleep that night, the lessons lingered. Bruises throbbed, arms ached, legs burned, minds replayed maneuvers and formations. Sleep came fast, deep and unrelenting, because tomorrow the training would continue, and the stakes, though still mock, would feel very real once again. The boys were no longer just learning. They were becoming warriors. Chapter 15, Graduation. Becoming a Spartan warrior. After years of relentless training, hunger, pain, and discipline, the day finally came. The day a Spartan boy left the Agoge and became a Spartan warrior. But don't imagine a loud celebration. No banners. No cheering crowds. Sparta never made a big show of it. Becoming a warrior was quiet, serious, personal. The final test was both symbolic and practical. Boys were evaluated on everything they'd endured: hunger, obedience, endurance, combat, strategy, and loyalty. The elders, those same mentors who had corrected, punished, and guided them for years, watched carefully. Every movement, every decision, every reaction mattered. Nothing had changed. The last stage often included a small but intense series of trials. Mock battles became larger, more realistic. Hunger and exhaustion were intentionally increased. The boys had to prove they could survive physically and mentally, in conditions that mirrored real war as closely as possible without crossing the line into actual danger. Success was not measured by who won a battle or who was strongest. It was measured by control. Could the boy act calmly under pressure? Could he endure pain without hesitation? Could he think clearly while exhausted, hungry, and under constant observation? Could he act for the good of his brothers, rather than for personal glory? Those who passed were given recognition, though subtle. A nod from an elder, a quiet word, a simple acknowledgement in front of peers. Praise was rare, but its rarity made it powerful. You didn't need to be told you were strong. You knew it from your body, your mind, and your brothers beside you. Graduation also included one of Sparta's most defining rituals, the final presentation to the city. Boys, now warriors, were expected to demonstrate their readiness. They carried their shields and spears. They moved in formation. They performed exercises that showcased all they had learned: obedience, discipline, endurance, and strategy. The audience was minimal. Spartan citizens did not require spectacle. They required proof. Proof that the new warriors could contribute to the defense of Sparta. Proof that the Agoge had worked. Proof that the boys were now men who could face danger without hesitation. This demonstration was quiet, precise, and efficient. Every movement, every decision, every breath counted. Mistakes were corrected immediately, but rarely punished at this stage. By now, most mistakes were internalized. Most boys moved instinctively. Most decisions were automatic. Mentors watched closely, but their faces remained calm. Approval was shown not with words or clapping, but through subtle gestures: a tilt of the head, a slight nod, a relaxed posture. The boys read these signals instinctively. By now, they had been trained to notice small cues, to adapt and to act without delay. Graduation also tested loyalty and camaraderie. Warriors were asked to perform tasks in pairs or groups. Cooperation was essential. Even the strongest individual could fail if he ignored his brothers. Spartan warriors were built to trust and support each other. Individual pride had to be balanced with collective responsibility. By the end of this process, the boys who survived had changed completely. The hunger, pain, exhaustion, and discipline had molded them into something new, something rare, something formidable. They were no longer children. They were Spartan warriors. The transformation was physical. Lean, strong, resilient bodies. Muscles honed by years of drills, running, lifting, and combat. Endurance that allowed them to fight, march, or march while fighting, under conditions that would break most men. The transformation was mental, calm under pressure, focused even when exhausted, strategically aware, able to anticipate danger, able to trust their instincts and their brothers, able to act decisively without hesitation, under fear and uncertainty. The transformation was emotional. Fear was acknowledged, controlled, and set aside. Pain was felt, but it did not dictate actions. Hunger, exhaustion, discomfort, they became background noise, tools to be managed rather than obstacles. The Spartan warrior was ready, and yet there was humility, a quiet understanding that survival was never guaranteed. That training prepared them, but only preparation could not ensure victory. That the real test, life or death in war, was still ahead. Graduation was not the end. It was the beginning. The years of training had been designed to last a lifetime. The lessons learned, the discipline, the obedience, the endurance, the strategy, the loyalty, these were tools for survival, not trophies to display. Spartans did not boast about their warriors. Their achievements were quiet, their pride internalized, and that silence, that focus, was part of what made them formidable. Outsiders might see only a disciplined army. Insiders knew it was far deeper, a system that had trained mind, body, and spirit in perfect harmony. Looking back, it becomes clear why you couldn't survive even a day in Spartan training. Not because it was cruel, not because it was impossible, but because it demanded endurance, control, discipline, and focus beyond what most modern humans experience in a lifetime. Hunger, exhaustion, constant supervision, competition, combat, and obedience. Compressed into a single day, it would break most people immediately. Yet for those boys who survived, the Agoge achieved its purpose. They became more than fighters. They became warriors in the truest sense. Capable, resilient, disciplined, and bonded to their brothers in a way that life rarely allows. In the quiet of Sparta, as the new warriors stood together at the edge of adulthood, there was no celebration, no fanfare, only the knowledge that they were ready, ready for the challenges ahead, ready to defend their city, ready to face danger with courage, focus, and loyalty. And perhaps that is the ultimate lesson. Spartan warriors were not born. They were forged, slowly, relentlessly, patiently, by hunger, by pain, by discipline, by mentorship, by brotherhood, by mock battles, by constant testing. They were shaped into beings capable of facing any challenge without hesitation. And that, in the end, is why Sparta was legendary. Because the boys who survived the Agoge didn't just become warriors. They became something far rarer. They became Spartan warriors.